The BMD Podcast, anytime you want. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm the BMD and you are listening and viewing the BMD Talks, part of our YouTube segment shows, and we're catching up with a friend of the show and a former guest and find out what does he say, what does he know now. We checked back in with Mark Lee Ford, and he's got so many initials behind his name. I'm not even going to attempt to do that. He can certainly tell us where he's been and has he got any more initials behind his name since we last talked. Mark, it is early here in Canada on our Eastern Standard Time, and of course getting later for you overseas. What time is it currently overseas right now?
It's 11 p.m. Wednesday, March the 3rd, BMD. Good to be back.
Wow. So this is, as I said, one of our catch-up episodes. And let me just do a quick recap. Last we left the viewers and listeners, you were working on maybe the secret vaccine that was going to be helping the world on this COVID pandemic. Then there was talk about maybe starting something new. And I hear through the grapevine possible retirement. So maybe catch us up.
Sure, happy to do so, BMD. Thanks very much for the invitation. Great to see you. I thought maybe I'll give you a few updates on the COVID situation here, if you'd like.
Yes.
Since we last spoke. I think we spoke, maybe it was November, December, I can't remember. I prepared a chart for you. This is from COVID-19japan.com. And this is what has been going on here since we last spoke.
Okay.
Roughly in the summer here, our numbers started to go down and we got this second wave around midsummer. And then it went down and then it really shot up around here, which is New Year's, Christmas time. And now it's tapering down a lot. So if we're to talk about the total number of cases in Japan, Japan has a population of about 125 million people. Canada, I think, has 37 million now. So Japan is about 3.3 times that of Canada. The total COVID cases in Japan, as of today, reported, they've tested about 8.4 million people, and they've had about 430,000 confirmed cases. Canada, on the other hand, has about double the number of confirmed cases, but Canada also has done a lot more testing. They have done about 3 times the number of tests of Japan. So it's kind of hard to compare to say, what's going right, what's the right approach, because, the data and the way it's collected, it all gets jumbled up even within each country. But I think it's probably safe to say that our numbers are starting to go down.
So you mentioned there seemed to be on the chart there a spike over the holiday period. Was that too much of the families hugging and kissing and getting together?
Yeah, there's not too much hugging and kissing that goes on in Japan, at least publicly. There's a lot of bowing, that's for sure. And maybe that was one of the factors that contributed to the lack of spreading here. Shaking hands and hugging and so forth is not the typical greeting. People bow. They take their shoes off before going in the house. And as we talked about before, wearing masks in Japan is no big deal. People are used to wearing masks. They've done it for a long time. No talking, at least loudly in the subways. Certainly no eating on the streets or in the subways. So kind of a lot of basic mindfulness to your fellow citizen here probably has contributed a lot to ring fencing this virus as opposed to other places in the world. In terms of things like where the vaccine is over here, unfortunately, Japan is far behind. If we look at the rollout, I found a timeline here for the rollout. Early February, there was some fast track approval for AstraZeneca's vaccine over here. And the rollout of Pfizer's began on 17th of Feb. But for the most part, people are not being vaccinated en masse here. Still got a way to go. So I think we're probably behind the curve here on the vaccinations.
What about, is that fear of the unknown, allergic reaction to the vaccine? Is it going to give me a new disease? It sounds like public fear. What's the problem?
Right. Well, I'm not an expert in the area, but my understanding is that in the 1990s, there was a debacle with some vaccines, and that's kind of made the Ministry of Health, I think, somewhat gun shy in rolling out new vaccines. There is a lot of talk here about the various technologies behind these vaccines, and some of them seem to be a little bit more riskier than others in the minds of the Japanese. And so I think they're taking a very measured, typically Japanese risk-averse way to testing it, making sure that it does what it says it's supposed to do before they roll it out.
How about the fear in the public on, similar to what you said, expand a little bit on that. Why the hesitation of the public on, okay, let's say availability is ready to go today. Why would somebody in your neck of the woods, why would they hesitate? Is it lack of belief? Is it, how's it going to affect me? Some people think it's a Band-Aid. What's the view overseas?
I think, at least as far as Japan is concerned, it's always fear of the unknown and adversity to risk. And if we look at the various technologies that involve, and again, I'm certainly not an expert in this, you'll have to talk to a microbiologist, but the actual transcriptions and rewriting of pieces of the code in the DNA, the kind of the layman's understanding of that is that it's relatively new technology. It's perhaps not well tested, and people are just concerned to be injected with this. Now, there are many people who have no concerns whatsoever. Probably I'm representative of most people here, not experts, a general audience of well-read non-experts, and trying to navigate our way through this. So for the most part, I'm speaking from ignorance, and perhaps a good many of the people around me are too.
So public awareness, public support is weak?
I think it depends who you talk to. I think everybody wants to have a very effective vaccine. They want to have it now. They want to get back to normal. But there is concern as to what is this genie in the bottle that they're going to let out. People are worried that somehow it's going to be rewriting their DNA, that it's irreversible for some of the vaccine technologies. For other of the vaccine technologies, apparently there's no risk of that happening. So I think there's a lot of confusion and uncertainty simply because people just don't know, including myself.
Your opinion, only your opinion, not your expertise, if you have it or you don't. You get called today, Mark Ford, you're dialed up, you get the shot. Would you get the shot today?
Well, I'll let maybe 10 or 50 million other people in the country take it first, and I'll see how that goes. And then I'll make a call. Although I'm in a high risk group, BMD, I'm 55. I'm clearly obese. I'm a male. So it would behoove me to get the vaccine. I just want to make sure I get the right vaccine and that I understand the limitations of it.
So how do you know, you mentioned a good point there, how do you know the right vaccine? I know that's just a cliche line, but what would you be looking for? I know multiple testing, the rat lab experiments and this and that. How do we know, to your point, let's say there's 4 or 5 available vaccines. Is it throwing a dart on the dartboard on I'll take that one or I'll take that one? How do we know which is the right one for us?
Well, that's
part of our health mode. Like if you're diabetic, you can take this one. You got blood pressure issues, you can take this one. Or are they all genetic, all just trying to grab the mighty dollar? Your opinion.
Yeah, I like the way you put it because you raise the complexity of medicine, especially on an individual level. So if you're looking at populations and population statistics of people who are nameless and faceless, that's one thing. But when you're talking about, I'm going to inject BMD with the secret sauce, you have certain peculiar medical aspects to you that nobody else on the planet has. And so by talking about the complexity and uncertainty on an individual level, that is the kind of discussions people should have with all aspects of medicine, not just vaccines. That said, we do have decades and decades of processes and protocols. We have government agencies that are supposed to investigate safety and efficacy. We have physicians who are trained and licensed who are supposed to give us recommendations on it. So I think to a large extent, we're just going to have to rely on the systems and processes that we have always done, whether it's a vaccine or an antibiotic or a new surgical procedure. Try to be well read, as informed as possible. There are plenty of opinions out there for people who like to read scientific journals and get into the data. That's a possibility as well. But, I think for the most part, people are going to have to rely on the conventional systems to get their recommendations and act accordingly. One thing's for sure, everybody has to be responsible for himself in terms of whether to take the vaccine, what vaccine to take, when, understanding his own body, her own body, potential side effects. Ultimately, it rests with us. We can't outsource that to a system.
Your opinion, safety versus money and greed. Your opinion.
Are they always opposite, Mike? BMD, are they always different from each other?
I think so.
Really?
Not really.
Yeah.
Your opinion on safety versus money and greed.
So the idea is that perhaps data will be adulterated or safety trials will be cut short in order to make a fast buck. Again, we have a system for that. We have certain checks and balances. If that does happen and if it's caught, we have a legal infrastructure to prosecute those kinds of things. I mean, there's always a lot of kind of conspiracy theories going around, and big pharma and the military industrial complex, and there's a cure for cancer, but big pharma has suppressed it because they want to make money. I mean, there's always going to be a story like that kicking around. I think you have to get back to, what is credible, what's the evidence to support it. I think from what I've seen, companies are earnestly trying to find solutions to this. There are a lot of very sincere, hardworking people in the related fields, medical fields, in pharmaceutical, who are genuinely and sincerely trying. Regulators are trying their best. Healthcare policy makers, they're trying their best. So look, everybody else is greedy except me. Everybody always thinks that. So greed is kind of our operating principle as Homo sapiens. That's always going to be there. But I think for the most part, Mike, that the intentions are good.
Listen, rumor on the street says that Mark Lee Ford is retired. Can you explain some of that truth, or is that just speculation?
I don't know if it's going to make a difference in anybody's lives except my own and my father's. But yes, semi-retired and moving on to other things. Well, retirement doesn't necessarily mean doing nothing. It's doing a completely different set or leveraging on what I've worked on before. So yeah, my father and I are going to get more involved in philanthropic activities, and we're making a foundation. And, we hope to be able to sponsor research, sponsor things in things like medical research and entrepreneurship and so on. So I'm looking forward to spending and developing those ideas over the coming months and years.
What are some of the targets and topics of the foundation? I know you mentioned research and development and medical overtone, but what about mankind? Usually when you start throwing those big words out, there's a mankind belief behind it. Tell us your philosophies about that going forward.
Well, BMD, I think that for dads and my approach, we just like to do it one person at a time. And we're not really, powerful enough, nor do we think that we can change the status quo. We just like to work on a very local level. One of the things that we're interested in is bacteriophages and their use in fighting cancer and their use in fighting infectious diseases. I mean, the company that I've been involved in for so many years, they are at the forefront of that. And with superbugs and antibiotic resistant bacteriophages may provide a very nice solution to a lot of the problems that we're facing today. So we'd like to sponsor more research in that. We'd like to develop entrepreneurs. We'd like to provide capital, not just to kind of the Shark's Tank stuff you see on TV or the Dragon's Den, but provide capital and instruction and training so people can take the lead in their own lives and develop themselves and contribute to society by creating prosperity for themselves, their communities, their loved ones. So very much our story.
So you're going to be teaching and looking and developing people to become entrepreneurs that perhaps have the gift, but don't have the platform or stage, if I'm correct. You're going to give them that.
We'd like to, and giving them access to capital is part of it, but also giving them a leg up on understanding how to run a business, understanding leadership, understanding how to create prosperity for themselves, their communities, their loved ones on a very local, small scale, very grassroots, starting from there. In a way, I'm basically using the template that I know best, and that's the one that's worked for us, and try to replicate that. I don't know if it's going to move mountains, but we hope we put a dent in some of the problems.
What are your goals of the foundation? Like, how high are you trying to reach on this outreach program? Like, you must say, in your boardroom meetings, I want to land 100 entrepreneurs this year and have them under my wing, my tutelage and guidance. What are your stats there? What are you trying to do there?
Right. The numbers I don't know, because we actually haven't figured that out yet. And the metrics and how many and how big a net we want to cast. I think we'd like to prototype this first BMD. We have a lot to learn ourselves. And, we made plenty of mistakes to get to this point, and we've enjoyed some modicum of success. And before we kind of go out and intrude in other people's lives, we'd like to prototype it and test our ideas out in cooperation with other people, and then take on what works, and what doesn't work we'll jettison, and then try to roll it out piece by piece from there. So in terms of scale and numbers, I can't say at this point. We're very much in the incipient stages.
Why did you want to do this in your semi-retired state? Okay, you're saying this is a pattern of your trials and tribulations on your father and your life, not style, but your lifeline. Is it a pay forward, pay back? You've come from the land of nothing to now something, and you want to turn that back in and offering help? Or did you feel you were, the guy that was kicked to the curb and you don't want to see that? Like, what's the motivation?
Sure. Oxbridge, Ontario isn't the land of nothing, BMD. Just joking. The motivation, I think, if we look at what's happened, to go back to the COVID discussion, right? If we look at what's happened to Canada, Japan, the world over the past year, we see a lot of good intentions and a lot of confusion, kind of the fog of war. And part of that is being highly politicized. But something that I've noticed, and I could be completely wrong, is that there is a tendency to get away from self-reliance and self-responsibility and accountability. So your questions, I thought, were really good. How do I decide whether or not to take this vaccine? Do I trust my doctor? Do I trust my pharmacist? Do I get the information off the internet? And who knows, it may be some of those or all of them or none of them. But I think that getting back to self-reliance, the kind of the pioneer spirit, not outsourcing everything to bureaucrats, although they have their role and they have their place as experts and so on, but taking it upon myself to be responsible for my decisions and bearing the rewards and also taking the licks accordingly. So that's what I'd like to see. And if I'm able to, use myself as an example or give other people a leg up, to take their lives in their own hands and not outsource it to experts like me with lots of letters by their name who are really experts in nothing. I think that's good. Maybe I'd like to demonstrate that the intelligentsia is not that intelligent. We have opinions about everything, but the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, the guy who slaughters animals for your table, the guy who unplugs your toilet at 3 a.m., they're perfectly capable of making very, very good decisions, the best decisions for themselves, informed decisions. And I would like, the so-called experts to kind of step back and not do so much finger wagging and telling people what they should and shouldn't do. Provide information and let people decide. That's the motivation, Mike.
In the world of pandemic and uncertainty, certainly on wave 1, wave 2, wave 3, independently waving for the rest of our life, with the pandemic doing its, as you showed, the graphic roller coaster stats, high, low, high, low, high, low, spike, spike, no spike. How is it going to affect? Are you going to be in a world of this format where you're Zooming your candidates forever? Obviously, we really don't know the year of 2021 if there's going to be back to the hugging and kissing and closeness, not only of family and loved ones, but certainly stepping out of the bricks and mortar. Where do you find your format of the foundation? Is it going to be an electronic touch, or how are you overcoming?
Yeah, and that's particularly interesting because one needs to ask what is going to stick around after COVID, that has come out of COVID, and what is just going to be transient because of COVID. I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that, for example, what we're doing now by Zoom, we used to do it by Skype for years. And in Japan, it's very, very common to have face-to-face meetings. And to think that, have to get in the subway, take a 30-minute trip in the subway, then go to the building, and then you have the meeting, and then a 30-minute ride. For a 20-minute, half an hour meeting, there's an hour on each side bracketing it. It's just a tremendous waste of time. So we've always used digital. And it's interesting, there's always been such a resistance to that over these years, just as there was to email in the 1990s in corporate world. They say, how could we use email? It's risky. People can see it. But we use email without a second thought today. I think a lot of the stuff that we were doing anyway before COVID in terms of remote collaboration will just simply continue. The principles of economics and the fundamentals, they're not going to change at all. I think that the means of communication have changed, and I think they're very efficient. I mean, this is a great example. You're in Canada, I'm here in Tokyo. Despite the time difference of 14 hours, we're able to have a real-time conversation and exchange ideas in a short period of time and accomplish the outcome that we want together. I think we're going to be doing this naturally. We already are doing it naturally, and we'll definitely do it with our foundation.
Do you feel you can really temper the client on this electronic voice and picture, and we're gathering today, we're smiling, joking, laughing, but do you really get the same feeling on being face to face in a one-on-one in a boardroom, or are these kind of cliche styles that, is it a fad that we're going to go through?
Yeah, well, so much depends on the content of what's being said, whether or not there's a picture. If it was just on the telephone or even in a handwritten letter, that ultimately prevails. That said, BMD, I teach part-time here at Temple University, Japan, and I teach a couple classes a week, and we started using Zoom from last year. A lot of the students ironically, the so-called digital generation, the ones who are supposed to be completely entwined with the technology, they're having the toughest time adapting. And I had a call from a student last night who participates in Socratic debates in my class. And she said, it's just not the same. I need to be in the room to have that kind of human touch. I can't express myself with, 15 little video boxes on my screen. And so a lot of the younger people are having a very, very tough time with Zoom, with lectures. So I think it depends a lot on the situation.
I think we might have discovered a new app or a new business venture there on how to improve and make the Zoom calls a little more juicier.
that could be it. That could be it. Maybe one of the solution is that not everybody needs to go to college, but I mean, that's even a deeper issue.
Absolutely. So what is the name of we've got a couple of minutes left. What is the name of the foundation? Give a light overtone of the goals. I know we've blended conversations, but you as Mark Lee Ford, you're here today. You're making a statement. I'm sounding like it's definitely semi-retired, maybe not retired. I'm hearing teaching. I'm hearing, new cancer research. I'm hearing a lot of things. Can you narrow it down a little for us?
Well, happy to do so. Well, first, we're going to have to get you over to Japan, BMD, and you're going to have to do a session from Japan. Maybe that's going to be one of our first projects. But it's
Lucas has to come with me.
Well, that's fine. That's no problem. We're happy to help him as long as he's vaccinated. We're calling it the J. Ford and Son Foundation. Jeffrey's my dad, and I'm the son, kind of like Sanford and Son. And and the purpose basically is to promote entrepreneurship, promote being free to choose and creating your life and prosperity, liberty for yourself and your loved ones through activities such as research, business, training, education, and so on. So it's apolitical. It has no political affiliation whatsoever. It's basically getting down to the basics of the kind of the pioneer spirit that we had in Canada and the US many, many years ago. And we want to try to reboot that in the 21st century for this, now not the millennial, but the centennial generation.
Interesting. Now, how, if somebody wants to connect with you, how do they do that?
Very easy. Please have them send me a mail at info at moneo.jp. That's M as in Mike, N-O-N as in November, EO.jp for Japan. Info at moneo.jp.
Well, I hope you enjoyed our re-catching up interview today, Mark, and I'd like to have you on again in a few months. Fascinated about this foundation, you and your dad. I love that co-opportunity and keeping it tight in the family and working through, views and maybe issues that have come up that affect everybody who know they're good enough to be there but can't get there. And you're going to, in your foundation, provide that avenue and that highway and freedom to maybe develop some of the entrepreneurs we don't know about that are there, because everybody deserves a second chance. That's what I'm feeling. Folks, you've been listening to the BMD on the BMD Talks on our YouTube channel, and our guest today was Mark Lee Ford, who has numerous initials behind his name. We didn't get into that, but we will at a later date. Mark, thanks for taking the time. You've been a blessing, and thanks for staying up on being on the other side of the world. You have a good day and good luck, and we'll catch up.
Thanks, BMD.